The last two seasons of Game of Thrones are pretty universally hated by most fans of the show for ruining what was once one of the most beloved series in TV history and turning it into a dumpster fire of dogshit writing and non-stop mindless action in favor of the masterfully crafted character-focused drama of the first 6 seasons. Seasons 7 and 8 are seen as an absolute betrayal and a war crime, frankly. Now, while I agree with a lot or even most of the common critiques against these seasons, I think there's a couple things about them that don't really deserve to be hated on as much, and one of these is the plotline involving the truth about Jon Snow's parentage and the reveal of his real name being Aegon Targaryen. Now, the reason this name reveal in particular is so commonly disliked is because Rhaegar Targaryen, who is revealed to be Jon's father, already had a son with Elia Martell, who was also named Aegon. So fans of the show seem to wonder why the fuck Rhaegar would name 2 of his sons Aegon. And while I agree that at first glance this seems pretty stupid, it actually makes a lot of sense and might even happen in the books. To understand why, we first need to understand Rhaegar Targaryen as a character. Rhaegar was born during the tragedy of Summerhall, where a castle of House Targaryen was burned down and many Targaryens were killed as a result. Rhaegar is said to have carried the pain of this tragedy for his entire life and spent a lot of his time wallowing about in the ruins of Summerhall, singing sad songs for the Targaryen lives that were lost. The pain he feels about what was done to his family is likely one of the reasons that he later becomes obsessed with fulfilling his Targaryen destiny in the name of all who came before him. He's a pretty dramatic guy. As revealed in his sister Daenerys' visions in the House of the Undying in A Song of Ice and Fire Book 2, A Clash of Kings, Rhaegar was very familiar with the prophecy of Azor Ahai, the prince who was promised, a legendary figure who would one day wield a flaming sword to destroy the White Walkers and restore peace to Westeros. Azor Ahai is implied to have a connection with dragons and is likely a Targaryen, and Rhaegar seems to believe that he himself could very well be Azor Ahai. This is because he has visions of the future and reads books about the prophecy that convince him he's the hero in question, and also because Rhaegar's parents got married and had him because a witch specifically told them that Azor Ahai would be born of their line, so this could very well mean Rhaegar. Maester Aemon, the Chad of the Night's Watch, seemingly agreed that Rhaegar was Azor Ahai because the prophecy states that Azor Ahai will be reborn amid smoke and salt, and Rhaegar was born during the fire of Summerhall, the smoke in this case being from the fire and the salt apparently being from the tears that were shed, which is kind of a fucking stretch if you ask me. Rhaegar also seemed to realize this because he eventually came to believe that Azor Ahai was not him, but Aegon, his son with Elia Martell. Daenerys actually sees a vision of Rhaegar with Aegon after his birth, and this is where we get to the most important part. Rhaegar actually tells Elia there must be one more. The dragon has 3 heads. This is referring to Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives Rhaenys and Visenya, the 3 most important Targaryens in history. Rhaegar and Elia have a daughter named Rhaenys and a son named Aegon because Rhaegar wants to recreate the legend of the 3 dragon riders in his own children to make them into epic prophecy babies. So it stands to reason Rhaegar wants a 3rd child named Visenya to complete the trio. But the problem is Elia, his wife, is rather sickly and after Aegon's birth isn't able to have any more children. Therefore, Rhaegar has to find another woman to carry his 3rd child, and this is where Lyanna Stark comes in. Rhaegar chose Lyanna over his beloved wife and rode off with her to conceive a child. This makes a lot more sense knowing the context of Rhaegar being obsessed with prophecy instead of Lyanna just being hot enough for Rhaegar to break his vows and start a fucking war. And so Jon Snow is born to Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. But there is a rather glaring issue here. Jon is a boy, not a girl. Rhaegar believes that he's destined to have a son named Aegon and 2 daughters named Rhaenys and Visenya, but instead he gets another son. This is why I believe Rhaegar naming Jon Aegon is really the only logical step he could take if he's willing to, and in his mind destined to choose another woman over his wife to have his babies, just so he can have another daughter named Visenya for prophecy. What the hell is he going to do when the child is his son? Well, he'll start over. Jon is now the Aegon in the prophecy instead of Rhaegar's first son, because in Rhaegar's mind, Elia was simply not meant to be the mother of his 3 children, but instead Lyanna is. In naming Jon Aegon, he's changing his mind about the prophecy again, with the hope that he and Lyanna's next 2 children will be girls, and he can finally complete the trio. Knowing everything we do about Rhaegar and his obsession with prophecy, Aegon is really the only Targaryen name that Jon could have. Now, yes, this is obviously a little bit cruel, abandoning your wife and children so you can replace them with another family for the sake of a prophecy is kind of a red flag, but the thing is, Rhaegar seems to be right, to an extent. Even if the 2 sisters aren't in the equation, Jon very likely is Azor Ahai. He's the Targaryen prince who was promised, destined to be reborn and defeat the White Walkers with a flaming sword, and his name is Aegon Targaryen, just like Aegon the Conqueror before him. The thing the show got wrong here, in my opinion, is not naming Jon Aegon, but mischaracterizing Rhaegar and leaving out his obsession with prophecy completely, telling us he only left with Lyanna because they were in love. The Aegon twist would make perfect sense if only it was properly explained, like I think it will be in the books. I actually think Jon's true Targaryen name was probably told to the showrunners directly by George R. R. Martin, because it makes perfect sense in the books universe. There is even another character in the books who may or may not be the original Aegon, son of Rhaegar, and how interesting would it be if the 2 Aegons had faced each other to determine who is truly the hero of the prophecy.